Welcome to Advisicon Academy Training. Advisicon is a group of authors, teachers, consultants, and technologists who are passionate about helping organizations maximize productivity by leveraging the Microsoft technology experience. We have over 25 years of expertise helping teams build efficiency utilizing great project management methodology. So stay tuned for some dynamic training.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Maria, and welcome to the webinar today. I will be presenting to you about a project manager's guide to Visio. And what that means is today I'll be covering about the data visualizer tool in Visio in order to help you better create flowcharts. A little bit about myself. I'm a project advisor at Advisicon. I am an experienced trainer. I love to give trainings, which is why I'm here today. I'm also a Microsoft certified professional, a OneNote and Visio expert. A little bit about me, just a little fun fact is I have the Advisicon mascot. Her name is Ahsoka. She is our unofficial therapy dog, and I just thought I'd share her with you today. This might seem a little biased, but I think she's pretty much the cutest dog ever. Okay, so what we will be covering today. We're going to be covering just a quick touch on what's new with Visio. Also, for those of you who were not at the last Visio webinar, I will also be showing the shortcut keys that are available with Visio to speed up your flowchart building process. After that, I'll be doing a demo of the data visualizer that project managers can utilize. After that, there will be a session for questions and then the summary. So I look forward to covering this with you today. So what's new with Visio? So there's one thing I really wanted to point out to you today. It's the fact that now there are templates for workflows to export to Power Automate. So recently, Microsoft released a template for Visio that you can now build out a flowchart in Visio and then export it to Power Automate. There are actually two templates available. Once you finish them, you can export them, which then allows you to take a couple of steps ahead in building your flow. I'll show you where those are today. Won't really get too deep into that, but I thought that's something you guys would find interesting. Shortcut keys. So for those of you who have worked in Visio, I'm sure you've noticed there's a lot of buttons to click, and sometimes it can just be time consuming if you're using a mouse pad, a lot faster if you're using your mouse, but I find the fastest way is to have the shortcut keys. Using these shortcut keys speeds up so much building your flow chart out. For example, the Control+1, the pointer tool, switching between that and the connection points can take tens of minutes off of your building your flowchart time. Also switching between text and connectors, or just switching to being able to build out a rectangle or ellipse. All of these shortcut keys will speed up the process of building your flowchart. So if you want to go ahead, if you haven't already, go ahead and take a screenshot so you have this available to you. Also, this recording will be posted later on in the week. So I'm going to just give you one more second, and there we go, demo. Alrighty, so what we will be covering today. So using Visio as a project manager, there's a lot of different things you can do. You have the ability to map out your current processes. You can use it to brainstorm. You can build out the data model, how you're going to be mapping out data within your system. There are endless options. And what we will be covering today is the data visualizer. The data visualizer is basically a tool available in the Plan 2 for Visio that allows you to map out your process using Excel and then export that table into Visio, which will then kind of take care of a couple of additional steps for you, build out your flow automatically in Visio, and then all you have to do is tweak it so that it looks both pleasing to you and make sure that it follows all of the processes correctly. So how you would do that is actually, it's a template that's available both in Visio and in Excel. I'd recommend starting in Excel. I have Visio open here because as a project manager, your time is limited. You've got lots to do and very little time to do it usually. So something I'd like to point out here before we jump into the data visualizer are these templates. In general, we'll be using templates today, and I would encourage using them at any day because these help you jump 5 to 10 steps ahead instead of starting from scratch with a blank drawing. For example, you've got your database model here. You can build a Gantt chart. You can actually connect a project schedule to a Gantt chart. You can export your project schedule and build out a beautiful timeline. Other functionalities that are available through templates are building out an organization chart, you could even build out a brainstorming diagram. Brainstorming diagrams are great because there's a handmade or a hand-drawn theme in Visio, so people are more likely to add some feedback to your diagram. So just you'll probably hear me say that a lot, is I'm very much pro templates. Templates save a lot of time. They let you build out your flowchart without having to kind of look and wonder where things are. It gives you everything you should need for that category of flowcharts. Moving on, so we'll go ahead and jump to the Excel. So how this works is you would actually go into Excel, and there's a template available in Excel that you can use to build out your flow. And you can do this for basic flowcharts, and you can do it for cross-functional flowcharts. Those are the only two that are currently available. So I recommend playing with that a little bit. So what we're going to focus on is just the basic flowchart, but you can do this, and we will look at the cross-functional flowchart in a little bit. So how this works is I'm going to go ahead and show you the end result. So basically, using this tool, I went ahead and built a basic flowchart, and then after building it out in Excel, created this very nice, simple, pretty flowchart, and it took about half the time that it would have normally taken me if I'd done it from scratch. So the tool we'll find in Excel, you can see I'm in New. You'll actually have to probably search for it in your online templates. Mine's at the top because I've been working with it today. You would search though for process. And then you have the two options available here. So you've got your process map for basic flowcharts. You've also got your process map for cross-functional flowcharts. I'm going to go ahead and grab the basic flowchart. So the great thing about using the templates is it actually provides you reminder instructions. So if you're watching this video, so you're going to know how to do it already, but having these instructions is a really good reminder. You don't have to use this template. You can build your own, but if this is your first time using the data visualizer, I'd recommend at least starting with this template and then building your own tables and mapping them out to Visio. It definitely speeds up the process, and if you use the template, it makes it it takes less time to export into Visio. So I'll show you what I mean in just a little bit. So you've got your instructions here, you've got understanding how this works. But if I go a little further, then there's actually the process map. So these columns all here are optional, except for really the blue ones. The owner, cost, start date, status, alternate description, they're kind of like icing on the cake. But in order to build out your flowchart, you are going to need to add content here. So each of these items needs an ID in order for Visio to know what process is which. So you've got your start and stop here, and I'm actually going to jump into the one that I already built out. I'm going to pull that up here. So this is the process map that I built out for that flowchart that you saw just a minute ago. So you'll see each of these items here has a unique identifier. There's the process step description. So if I was to pull up the Visio flowchart, you'd notice that each of these line items here, the description in the text box of those items would match this description here. Let me see if I can just go ahead and pull that up and do kind of a side by side. And we'll pull up. So you can see the first item here, P1, team member suggests a project, matches this first start box right here, team member suggests a project. And you can see as we go through, this will all map out here. Now, this didn't just automatically export and look like this. There was a little bit of work that needed to be done. So I'm going to show you how to do that. So let's say you've already gone through, you've mapped out each item. So you've got your team member suggest a project. That needs to be connected to the next item. So that's what this next step ID is. So this here is where the connector is going to go. So team member suggests a project needs to be connected to team discusses idea in a meeting. And that then needs to be followed and needs to be connected to the decision of participants decide if it's a good idea. Now, in order to have multiple connectors connected to multiple different processes, you can separate multiple step IDs using a comma. As you can do the same thing with the connector label. Now, something also important that you'll need to define for each of your processes is what shape you're going to be using. You'll need to, if you want to start, end, if this is going to be a document, if it's data, database, etc. If you don't define a shape type, it's automatically going to assume it's a process. And then owner is not necessarily necessary for this. What it is useful is for later on, I'm going to show you a little tip for reporting after you've built the flowchart. So going on from there, let's say you finished that. You've connected all of your items. Team member rejects idea has been connected to actually all the way down here to the end of proposal process. That's all finished. Now you want to export your flowchart to Visio. How you would do that is going to the table design and hitting the export down arrow. You have three options here. You can export table to a SharePoint list, or you can export the table to Visio pivot diagram or the Visio diagram. Today, what we're going to be using is Visio diagram. I'm exporting, so I went ahead and hit export. It's coming up on my other screen, so I'm going to drag it over in just a minute. Let me just go ahead. What's coming up first is this pop-up window for creating a diagram from data. So what this is doing is basically saying, I want to build a basic flowchart. This is the Excel book workbook that I'm going to connect this flowchart to, and I need to select a table or custom range, and this table is named process map. So we're just going to wait for that to load. I can change this if I don't have the right document. I can set a custom range, but because I'm using the template that Microsoft put together, I don't necessarily need to do that. It's going to speed along the process. So you'll see here the process step, so it's connecting, it's mapping the columns right now. You can go in and customize each of these items. You don't necessarily need to if you're using that template. I'm going to hit next. This is again, if the shape is not specified, so you're making sure that all of the shapes are correct here for your flowchart, go ahead and hit next. And then you're notifying the flowchart that the comma delimiter is separating the steps or connectors, or in this case, the connectors. So this is all done. And again, because I used the template, I can just go ahead and hit finish. And it is loading on my other screen, so I'm going to pull it over in just a second for you to see. So this is what you're going to probably get. It's going to be a little bit messy compared to the end result that we are looking for, but updating this is now going to be a lot faster than it would be if you were doing this from scratch. So what I'm going to go ahead and do, so this heading box is another shape. We don't necessarily need it, so I'm going to just drag, select all of the items in the box, and I might have to do that again, but nope, we're good to go. So I just missed the team member. So I'm going to use those keyboard shortcuts, Control Z, and go ahead and select the interior of the box again. And there we go, remove the whole thing. We can delete the header now, this heading box. We don't need it. And then I'm gonna go ahead and drag, select everything. You can also use the Control A button to select everything. I just like doing this when I have my mouse. But if I hit Control A, I can then drag everything over and start moving things around to how I want them to be. I don't know about you, but for me, this is really hard to read. So what I could actually do to make it a little easier and more visually pleasing is to go to the Design tab and actually pick what colors I want this to be mapped out in. So that's not really working for our background here, but I could go ahead. This is the one I think I picked for the other demo for the end result. So I'm going to go ahead and pick that, and we're going to need to zoom in just a tad. So to zoom in, also, for those of you who aren't aware, if you hit the control button and then scroll your mouse, you can zoom in and zoom out very quickly. So what you would do now is, now that you have everything mapped out, you could then begin moving the items to how you want it to be seen and how you want it to be read. So as I'm moving these items, you'll notice too that it'll automatically tell me when I'm lined up to the other items, which doesn't do, of course, when I mention that. But then you're able to take 5-10 minutes, map out your entire flowchart instead of going from the beginning, grabbing connectors, and then taking 30 to 45 minutes on a basic flowchart. This will speed that up, and then if there's any edits that you needed to make in the Excel report, you could just go back and do that again. And then you could continue until this looks however you want it to be. If you wanted to go ahead and add that background is available over here. You've got multiple different options. You've also got background colors here. You need to not be selecting one of the items. And then we could do the globes in the background. We could do, which is one of my personal favorites, the one I use for the demo is this one here, which also removes the little lines that are dividing out the pages. So a little tip for printing or reporting on your flowchart. So if we go to the finished product here, I'm going to grab that. Let's see, here we go, and expand. If you are finished with your flowchart and it looks exactly how you want it to be, you can actually go to Process and select Word. Now, what this is doing is it allows you basically to build a report and use your flowchart in order with that report and embed it into the report. So you can see here it's grabbing different sections. And actually pull this out. This is the preview of each of the separated sections that would go into the Word document. We don't really have time to tweak it today, but if I went ahead and hit export, it'll actually build a document that you could then edit and customize to your company's logo and the dates and any content that you wanted to add. And this is where those kind of icing on the cake items would come into play. You can see it's providing all this information: connector label, owner, process ID, etc. And it's mapping out each phase basically of your flow chart, and it gives you an opportunity. All you really need to do is add a description along with some potentially additional detail as to why and the company's logo, etc. So that is how you use the Data Visualizer tool. In project, I just do, not in project, sorry, in Excel and Visio. If you wanted to, you can, if you've already built out the Excel report and you wanted to, and you stepped away, closed the Excel document, and you wanted to just open up Visio, you can connect it to the Excel report through Visio. So if you go to File and New, you can actually grab that basic flowchart here and it'll then ask basically for the link to the Excel document that you mapped out. If you wanted to do a process map for the cross-functional flowchart, then you can open up that Excel template, and the process map is just a little bit different. You also need a basically function and a phase. Those will then help you map out the swim lanes in that flowchart. One last item before we take questions is I did mention that I would show you guys where the Power Automate flowchart is. And if I remember correctly, you'd search for basic. Oops. No. So we're going to go ahead and go back to new. I clicked the wrong. There we go. So you would do. There it is. So you've got the basic starter diagram. Also, there's two of them here that you could then use, map out your diagram and then export it to Power Automate. So since we have a little extra time today, I'm going to go over just a quick couple of tips and tricks. One of which we covered was the design. You can change the design easily with the design tab. You can also then change the variance of the colors. So I like this one personally. If you were in a situation where you needed to kind of hurry and organize your flowchart after doing the data visualizer, you can actually select smaller groups of the processes and actually do auto align. So you can do just align shapes using the auto. You can choose to left align, which works except it's covering one of the other processes. So auto align can be extremely beneficial in this scenario. Also, it's very helpful if you're trying to straighten out. So if this was crooked and I wanted to straighten out the link between them, if you hit auto align, it'll actually straighten things between the two of them. Another option you have is if, for example, you grabbed the wrong shape and instead of grabbing a brand new one, you can click the shape and hit change shapes. So if I wanted to take the end of process and actually turn it into a, let's see, this is a cool, let's do, if I wanted to switch it to a document and then update the content, I could. Instead of grabbing a brand new one, rewriting it, or for example, if I viewed the team reviews proposal as a sub-process, instead of a process, all I would need to do is switch the shape, and that would update the item. So another tip is the auto connect. So if you'll notice, if you hover over, some of you might have the ability to hover over and then create new links. If you don't, then something that you would look into doing is click the auto connect. The auto connect needs to be clicked, checkboxed here in the view tab. And what this does is if I were to add a new box and I wanted to connect it, which it does, there it is, there we go. You hover over it. It's just choosing to be fickle, but if you guys saw those blue arrows, you would then be able to hover over and choose what box you would want following. So you would want to have that checked here in the View tab. You also want to go to File, Options, and then go to, and it's in Advanced, and make sure that this checkbox here, Enable Auto Connect, is checked. And then if it is, great. If not, then you're better off having it checked. That will then allow you to have the option to automatically add visuals, and they'll provide basically any of the 4 top visuals that are here. If you wanted different ones, you can move these around so that then you have an option to select the 4 top favorites that you have. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. So the items that we covered were basically what's new, the ability to create a flowchart and export it to Power Automate, the shortcut keys that are available with Visio. I hope you enjoyed those. Visio for project managers, so the data visualizer, how to use that as a project manager. When you're building out those processes, sometimes just doing it in Visio takes a really long time, but mapping it out mentally in Excel can be a lot simpler when you're trying to put that together in your head. So I'd recommend using that data visualizer as you're beginning to map out those processes and using that template because it will speed things up. And then if there are any questions that you have, then feel free to email us, and we are happy to have you, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Thank you, guys.